The great hall of Zenith Prime Station stretched wider than any cathedral on Earth. 200 alien species filled the chamber, their forms ranging from the beautiful to the nightmarish. Some floated in containment fields filled with methane gas. Others stood on 6 legs or slithered across the polished floor. At the center of it all, standing completely alone, was Ambassador Sarah Chen. She wore a simple blue diplomatic uniform with Earth's flag on her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her face showed no emotion as she looked at the creatures surrounding her. Every eye, stalk, and sensor in the room focused on her small human form. The speaker's platform rose from the floor. Standing on it was War Marshal Correx of the Krathon Dominion. He stood 3 meters tall, covered in dark purple scales that clinked like armor plating. 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. His mouth held rows of teeth designed for tearing meat. Behind him, holographic displays showed fleets of warships and burning planets. Human, Correx's voice rumbled through the translation devices everyone wore. Your species achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 rotations ago. You have established 12 primitive colonies. You possess no energy shields. Your weapons are chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Your ships move on controlled explosions. He paused, letting contempt drip from every word. You are children playing with fire. Murmurs rippled through the assembled species. Sarah remained silent and still. Correx gestured to the displays behind him. The Krathon Dominion has conquered 47 star systems. Our military has never known defeat. We have destroyed species with technology far beyond your own. The displays showed alien cities crumbling under orbital bombardment. We offer you terms, human. You will surrender all colony worlds. You will submit to Dominion rule. You will provide resources and labor. In exchange, we will allow your homeworld to survive. The chamber fell silent. Every species present had heard similar ultimatums before. Most had chosen surrender. A few had chosen war. None of those warlike species still existed. A council member from the Vex Collective, a species of insect-like beings, clicked forward. Ambassador Chen, please consider carefully. The Krathon do not make empty threats. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance ensures extinction. Another voice spoke, this one from a gaseous being that shimmered in its containment field. In our calculations, humanity possesses 0.3% chance of victory. Surrender is logical. Sarah finally moved. She took 3 steps forward, her boots clicking on the floor. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. I have consulted with my government. I have spoken with our military commanders. I have heard the voice of our people. She looked directly at Correx. Earth's answer is no. We will not surrender our colonies. We will not submit to your rule. We will not become your slaves. Shocked sounds erupted from the assembled aliens. Several species began talking at once. The Vex representative's antennae waved frantically. This is suicide! You doom your entire species. Sarah turned to address the entire chamber. Maybe we do. But humanity has a saying. It is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. She looked back at Correx. We decline your offer, War Marshal. Do your worst. For a moment, Correx seemed genuinely surprised. Then his face twisted into what might have been a smile, showing all those terrible teeth. Your bravery is noted, human. It will make no difference. He raised one clawed hand and pointed at her. I give you one more chance. Surrender now or watch your species burn. No, Sarah said simply. Correx's 4 arms spread wide. Then humanity is declared an enemy of the Dominion. We will destroy your colonies one by one. We will bombard your homeworld until nothing remains but ash and radiation. Your species will be erased from existence. This I promise you. We'll see, Sarah replied. The War Marshal laughed, a deep booming sound that echoed through the chamber. You have spirit, little human. I almost regret that you will not live to see your error. He turned to the assembled council. Let it be recorded. The Krathon Dominion declares war on the human species. We estimate total victory within 1 solar cycle. Their extinction within 2. The council members began filing out, most throwing pitying looks at Sarah. A few seemed angry that she had chosen such a foolish path. Others appeared curious about what would happen next. As the chamber emptied, only a handful remained. An old reptilian ambassador approached Sarah slowly. Why? It asked in a wheezing voice. Why choose death? Sarah looked at the ancient creature. Because we've learned something in our history. Freedom isn't given, it's taken, and it's worth dying for. She picked up her data pad and prepared to leave. Besides, the War Marshal made one critical mistake. What mistake? The reptilian asked. He assumed we'd fight like everyone else. Sarah walked toward the exit. He's about to learn why humans have a reputation for being stubborn. Behind her, Correx watched her go. Something in her confidence disturbed him, but he pushed the feeling aside. She was just one small human. Her species had primitive weapons and no real military to speak of. The war would be over in months. He would remember this moment later when the screaming started and the casualty reports came in. He would remember the way she walked out of that chamber with her head high. He would remember thinking it was just bravado. He was wrong. The Krathon war fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima system. 500 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy shields. At the center flew Correx's command dreadnought, a vessel the size of a small moon. Begin standard intimidation protocol, Correx ordered from his command throne. This was how every conquest began. First, they showed overwhelming force. Second, they broadcast images of previous victories. Third, they waited for the inevitable surrender. The communication officer activated the broadcasts. Images of burning cities and shattered fleets flooded every frequency. The message was simple and had been translated into human languages. Surrender or die. You have one rotation to comply. On the planet below, Proxima Station housed 2 million human colonists. The Krathon sensors detected farms, factories, residential areas, and a small orbital defense station. 40 human warships, tiny compared to Krathon vessels, orbited the planet in a defensive formation. Correx studied the tactical display. 40 ships, pathetic. He gestured to his second-in-command. How long until they surrender? Based on previous conquests, they should respond within one rotation, offering terms. The officer replied. One rotation passed. Then 2. Then 3. No surrender came. Instead, something strange happened on the planet below. The sensors showed massive movement. Every civilian, all 2 million of them, began evacuating to underground shelters and transport ships. The movement was organized and fast, following what looked like pre-planned routes. They're evacuating, the sensor officer reported, confusion in their voice. Every civilian is moving to designated safe zones. They're following some kind of emergency protocol. Correx leaned forward. Emergency protocol? How long have they been planning this? Unknown, War Marshal. But the speed suggests extensive training. Even their younglings know exactly where to go. This was unusual. Most species panicked during invasions. They fled randomly, clogged transportation routes, and caused chaos. But the humans moved like a military unit. Parents carried children to shelters. Emergency supplies were already stockpiled. Transport ships loaded refugees with mechanical efficiency. Within 6 rotations, the planet was nearly empty of civilians. Impossible, Correx muttered. No species evacuates that fast. His tactical officer studied the display. War Marshal, the 40 human ships are moving into attack formation. Attack? Correx almost laughed. 40 ships against 500? Open communications. Let me speak to their commander. A human face appeared on the screen. The man wore a military uniform and had gray hair cut short. His eyes were cold and calculating. I'm Admiral Jackson, Proxima Defense Fleet. State your business. Admiral, I am War Marshal Correx. You face 500 warships. You have 40. Surrender now and your people may live as servants. Refuse and we will destroy everything. Jackson's face didn't change. You want Proxima Station? Come and take it. The communication cut off. Correx sat back, genuinely surprised for the second time in a week. They refused to surrender. Very well, all ships advance. Destroy the defense fleet, then occupy the station. The Krathon fleet moved forward in their standard battle formation, a massive wall of ships designed to overwhelm any opposition. The human ships scattered like insects, breaking formation and fleeing in different directions. They run, Correx said with satisfaction. Pursue and destroy. But the humans weren't running. They were repositioning. The first Krathon ship exploded when it passed through an asteroid field. 30 human ships had hidden among the rocks, their engines cold and sensors passive. They opened fire at point-blank range, missiles and railgun rounds tearing through shields before the Krathon could react. Ambush, someone shouted. Before Correx could respond, Another group of human ships attacked from behind, targeting the fleet's supply vessels. They fired and then vanished into a nearby nebula before the Krathon could return fire effectively. The battle turned chaotic. The humans refused to engage in proper combat. They hit and ran. They used asteroids for cover. They fired from impossible angles and retreated before the Krathon could bring their superior numbers to bear. "This is not how warfare is conducted," Correx roared. "They have no honor." "War Marshal, we're taking heavy casualties," his tactical officer reported. "They're targeting our engines and weapon systems specifically. It's like they know exactly where to hit us. Of course they did." Humans had been studying Krathon ships from intercepted data for months, looking for weaknesses. The battle lasted 2 full days. When it ended, the Krathon had won. The human ships were destroyed or had retreated. Proxima Station was theirs to occupy, but the victory felt hollow. 150 Krathon ships were destroyed or too damaged to continue. 30% of the fleet gone. The remaining ships were battered and low on ammunition. "Secure the station," Correx ordered. "Begin occupation procedures." The boarding parties entered Proxima Station carefully. It was completely empty. Every human had evacuated, but worse, everything useful was gone. The factories had been stripped of equipment. The power plants had been shut down and their cores removed. The food supplies had been taken, and then the trap started. The first squad triggered a booby trap that collapsed an entire section of the station. The second found explosive charges hidden in the walls. The third discovered that the station's computer systems had been wiped and filled with viruses that infected any Krathon device that connected to them. Correx stood in the command center of the empty station, looking at the destruction around him. On one wall, someone had spray-painted a message in both human and Krathon languages. "Welcome to Proxima. Enjoy your stay. See you soon." His communication officer approached nervously. "War Marshal, intelligence has finished analyzing the data we captured from human computers. You need to see this." The officer showed him files about Earth's history. Wars. Thousands of years of wars. Humans fighting humans with increasing brutality. Something called World War I, where millions died in trenches for tiny strips of land. World War II, where entire cities were burned from the sky. Conflicts in places called Vietnam and Afghanistan, where superior military forces were bled dry by guerrilla warfare. "They've been doing this to each other?" Correx asked quietly. "For their entire history, War Marshal. They've been fighting each other since before they discovered agriculture. They know every dirty trick of warfare because they've used them all on themselves." Correx looked at the casualty reports again. 30% losses to achieve a hollow victory over an empty station. This was just one colony. Humanity had 11 more plus Earth itself. For the first time in 50 campaigns, Correx felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. 3 months had passed since the war began. Correx studied the reports with growing frustration. On paper, the Krathon were winning. They had captured 3 human colonies. They had won every major space battle. Their fleet controlled the strategic systems, but nothing felt like victory. The latest report came from the occupied colony of New Terra. The garrison commander's face appeared on the communication screen, looking exhausted. "War Marshal, we require additional troops. The human insurgency has destroyed another supply depot. That's the 4th this month." "How?" Correx demanded. "We have 3,000 soldiers on that planet. The humans evacuated all military forces. They left behind civilians, sir, or people we thought were civilians. They hide weapons and attack our patrols. We can't tell who's a threat and who isn't. They all look the same to us." Correx closed his eyes. This was the pattern on every occupied world. The humans left behind people who called themselves farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers. Then those same people planted bombs, sabotaged equipment, and vanished into the population. "Execute some of them as examples," Correx ordered. "We tried that, sir. It made things worse. For every human we execute, 10 more join the resistance. They don't fear death the way other species do." Another communication came in from a different colony, then another. Every garrison reported the same problems. Supply lines were under constant attack. Patrols disappeared. Equipment malfunctioned because of sabotage. The humans had even managed to hack into some Krathon computer systems, spreading viruses and stealing data. The tactical officer approached Correx with a data pad. "Sir, you need to see this. We intercepted a human military communication. The message was simple text, sent between human commanders. Remember the doctrine? We don't need to win battles. We just need to make victory cost more than they can afford to pay. Bleed them. Exhaust them. Make them regret every step forward. Correx threw the datapad across the room. This is not warfare. This is terrorism. For humans, sir, there appears to be no difference. When they're losing, they use what they call guerrilla tactics. When they're winning, they call it warfare. On the front lines, young Krathon soldiers who had dreamed of glorious combat found themselves in a nightmare. They patrolled empty streets, jumping at every sound. They watched friends die to traps and ambushes. They never saw the enemy clearly, just shadows and the flash of gunfire. One such soldier was Vextor. He had joined the military for honor and glory. He had imagined himself in grand space battles, not walking through abandoned human towns looking for bombs. His squad moved through a settlement on the colony world of Armstrong. Intelligence reported that insurgents used this area as a base. Every building was empty. Every door was open. It was too quiet. I don't like this, Vextor whispered to his squad leader. Stay alert. Watch for... The explosion came from nowhere. Half the squad died instantly. Vextor was thrown against a wall, his armor cracked and smoking. Through blurry vision, he saw movement. Humans wearing civilian clothes emerged from buildings carrying weapons. They fired at the surviving Krathon soldiers with precise, practiced movements. Vextor tried to raise his weapon, but a human shot it from his hands. The human was old, probably 60 Earth years, with gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes. He aimed his rifle at Vextor's head. Please, Vextor begged. I surrender. The old human studied him for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon slightly. Run. Tell your war marshal that we'll fight him in every town, every forest, and every tunnel until you leave or until we're all dead. Now run. Vextor ran. Back at headquarters, the reports piled up. The Krathon were winning battles but losing the war. Supply costs were astronomical. Soldiers were demoralized. 3 officers had requested transfers off frontline duty, something that had never happened before in Krathon military history. And still, the humans kept fighting. The Galactic Council watched these events unfold with growing shock. Species that had surrendered to the Krathon with barely a fight now watched as humans turned every victory into a costly slog. Ambassador Sarah Chen appeared via hologram at a council session, standing in front of a display showing casualty numbers on both sides. The Krathon have won 3 colonies, she said calmly. It has cost them over 200 ships and 30,000 soldiers. They hold these colonies at a cost of 5,000 soldiers per world, and that number grows monthly. They're bleeding resources, ships, and morale. She paused. We're losing, but we're making them pay for every inch of ground with blood and treasure they can't afford. A council member from the Vex Collective spoke up. But Ambassador, you're losing people too. Your casualties are enormous. Yes, Sarah agreed, but every human knows what we're fighting for. Freedom, the right to exist on our own terms. We'll pay any price for that. Another voice from a species that had surrendered to the Krathon decades ago spoke quietly. Why didn't we fight like this? Why did we give up so easily? Sarah's expression softened. Because you're sane. You're logical. You calculated the odds and made the reasonable choice. She looked around at the assembled aliens. Humans aren't always reasonable. We've fought impossible odds before. We've endured things that would break other species. Our history is written in blood and sacrifice. We know how to suffer, and we know that sometimes suffering is the only path to victory. Back on the front lines, Correx read another casualty report. Then another. Then another. Each one represented ships destroyed, soldiers killed, resources expended. The war was only 3 months old, but it felt like years. His second-in-command entered the command center. Sir, intelligence has completed their analysis of human military history. The report isn't disturbing. Show me. The display lit up with information about human conflicts. The siege of Leningrad, where humans ate rats and died by the hundreds of thousands rather than surrender. The defense of Thermopylae, where 300 soldiers held off an army of thousands. The Battle of Stalingrad, where humans fought for every building, every room, every inch. They don't surrender, the officer said quietly. Even when defeat is certain, they don't stop. There are dozens of examples throughout their history where humans fought to the last person rather than give up. Correx stared at the reports. The war was far from over. Humanity had 9 more colonies to defend, plus Earth itself. If they fought this hard for every single world, the cost would be catastrophic. "Calculate our losses if the current pattern continues," he ordered. The computer ran the numbers. The results appeared on screen. At the current rate of attrition, the Krathon military would be combat ineffective within 18 months. The Dominion would be bankrupted within 2 years. Korrex sat back in his command throne, staring at numbers that should have been impossible. They were winning every battle. How were they losing the war? The answer was simple, though he didn't want to accept it yet. Humans didn't fight to win battles. They fought to make their enemies quit. And they were very, very good at it. 6 months into the war, everything changed. Korrex received the report during what should have been a routine briefing. His intelligence officer stood before him holding a datapad with trembling hands. "War Marshal, the humans have launched a counter-offensive. 4 colonies simultaneously. Impossible. We destroyed their main fleet 3 months ago. They built another one, sir. A bigger one. And their ships are different now." The display showed the new human vessels. They were sleeker, faster, and covered with weapons that the Krathon had never seen before. Railguns that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, punching through energy shields like paper. Missile swarms controlled by artificial intelligence too numerous and unpredictable to intercept. And something new. Something that made Korrex's blood run cold. Antimatter mines. The human fleet had seeded the approach routes to their colonies with thousands of mines, each containing enough antimatter to vaporize a battleship. The Krathon garrison fleet at New Terra had stumbled into the minefield and lost 40 ships before they could retreat. They were holding back, Korrex said slowly. All this time they were holding back their best weapons. "It appears so, sir. Our intelligence suggests they've been studying our tactics and technology. Every battle we won gave them more data. They learned from us while we thought we were simply defeating them. The counter-offensive was devastating. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, struck with overwhelming force and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They coordinated perfectly, hitting multiple targets at once and spreading Krathon forces thin. Within 2 weeks, humanity had retaken 3 colonies. On the garrison world of Armstrong, Vextor and his squad received evacuation orders. The humans were coming and command didn't think the garrison could hold. "We're retreating?" another soldier asked in disbelief. "The Krathon don't retreat. We do now," Vextor said quietly. As they boarded the transport ships, human forces entered the system. Vextor watched from a viewport as human warships tore through the Krathon defense fleet. The garrison escaped, but barely. During the flight back to Krathon space, Vextor couldn't stop thinking about everything he'd seen. The ambushes, the traps, the old human man who could have killed him but chose to let him go. The casual way humans face death as if it was just another part of life. The transport docked at a rear supply station. As Vextor disembarked, he made a decision. He approached a Krathon intelligence officer. "I need to speak with someone about the humans," Vextor said. "I need to tell them what I've seen." "We have all the field reports we need, soldier." "No," Vextor insisted. "You need to hear this from someone who's actually fought them, who's looked them in the eyes. We can't win this war." The intelligence officer stared at him. "That's defeatist talk. You could be executed. Then execute me, but first listen." 3 hours later, Vextor sat in a debriefing room telling his story to a room full of senior officers. He told them about the insurgencies, about how every human seemed willing to die for their cause, about the terror of fighting an enemy that viewed death as acceptable rather than something to be avoided. "They call themselves a young species," Vextor said, "but they've been fighting wars since before they had metal. They've spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. They know things about warfare that we've never imagined, because we've never had to. We fight for conquest. They fight for survival. There's a difference." One of the senior officers stood up. "This soldier has clearly been traumatized by his experiences. His testimony is unreliable, but others weren't so sure." The casualty report supported everything Vextor said. The counteroffensive proved that humans were far more capable than initially assessed. The report made its way up the chain of command. When it reached Korrex, he read it 3 times. Then he pulled up the complete battle history of the war and studied it with fresh eyes. The humans had been testing them. Every battle, every skirmish, every ambush had been a learning experience. The humans lost ships and soldiers, but they gained knowledge. They figured out how Krathon shields worked. They learned tactical patterns. They identified weaknesses. And now they were using that knowledge to destroy the Krathon military piece by piece. A priority message came through from High Command. Correx activated it, expecting new orders or reinforcements. Instead, he saw the face of Supreme Commander Thekra, the highest-ranking military officer in the Dominion. War Marshal Correx, the Council has made a decision. You are to use the biological weapons on the human homeworld. Total extinction is now authorized. Correx felt something twist in his chest. Biological weapons were forbidden by galactic law. They were considered too terrible to use even against enemies. They killed everything, military and civilian alike, and left worlds as dead zones for generations. Supreme Commander, with respect, I recommend against this course of action. Your recommendation is noted and rejected. The humans must be eliminated before they become a greater threat. Use the weapons, War Marshal. That's an order. The communication ended. Correx sat alone in his command center, staring at the orders. He thought about everything he'd learned about humans. Their history showed that extinction-level threats didn't make them surrender. They made them fight harder. If he used biological weapons on Earth, the remaining humans would never stop fighting. They would chase the Krathon across the galaxy seeking revenge, and they would probably win. He thought about his own people, about the Dominion, about whether conquest was worth extinction. Then he did something no Krathon war marshal had ever done in the history of their species. He refused the order. Instead, Correx sent a message to Ambassador Sarah Chen. The message was simple: we need to talk about terms. When High Command learned of his refusal, they stripped him of command and ordered his arrest for mutiny. But the damage was done. Word spread through the military that their greatest war marshal thought the war was unwinnable, that humans couldn't be defeated, only destroyed, and that destroying them would cost too much. Morale, already fragile, shattered completely. 3 days later, another fleet commander refused orders to advance. Then another. The Krathon military machine, which had conquered 47 star systems without significant opposition, ground to a halt against humanity's stubborn refusal to quit. The Galactic Council, watching these events unfold, began preparing documents for a peace conference. The impossible had happened. Humanity, the youngest spacefaring species, had fought the Krathon Dominion to a standstill, and the Krathon were the ones looking for a way out. 9 months after the war began, the Galactic Council chamber filled once again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The Krathon delegation entered quietly, without their usual swagger. At their head walked Correx, stripped of his military rank but present as a representative of his people. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the same spot where she had refused surrender 9 months earlier. But now humans occupied chairs around her. Military officers, diplomats, representatives from every human colony. They no longer stood alone. The council mediator, an ancient being from a species that had existed for millions of years, activated the proceedings. We gather today to negotiate terms of peace between the Krathon Dominion and humanity. The Dominion has requested this meeting. Ambassador Chen, humanity has been asked to present its terms. Sarah stepped forward. She held a datapad but didn't look at it. She had memorized every word. The Krathon Dominion will immediately withdraw from all human territory. All occupied colonies will be returned to human control, undamaged as much as possible. The Dominion will pay reparations for the destruction caused during this war. The payments will continue for 20 Earth years. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Reparations? The losers of wars paid reparations, not the conquerors, Sarah continued. The Krathon will reduce their military forces by 60%. The remaining forces will be monitored by neutral observers. Any Krathon military vessel entering human space without permission will be considered an act of war. A Krathon representative stood up, his scales flushed dark with anger. These terms are insulting. We still have the larger military. We could continue this war. Sarah turned to face him directly. Yes, you could. And you would lose. You've lost nearly half your fleet already. Your economy is collapsing under the weight of war expenses. Your soldiers are refusing orders. You came here because you know what we know. This war is over and you didn't win it. The Krathon representative sat down slowly, saying nothing. Correx stood up. May I speak? The mediator nodded. Ambassador Chen is correct. We came here to end this war because we cannot win it. He looked around the chamber at the assembled species. 9 months ago, I stood here and declared that humanity would be extinct within 2 solar cycles. I was arrogant. I was foolish. I underestimated an enemy that I didn't bother to understand. He walked to the center of the chamber, standing a few meters from Sarah. I have a question for you, Ambassador. I've asked myself this question every day for months, and I need to hear your answer. He paused. Why? Why does your species fight so hard? Most species, when faced with impossible odds, surrender. They negotiate. They compromise. Why do humans fight until they can't fight anymore? Sarah looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because we've learned what happens when you don't fight. Our history is filled with tyrants and conquerors. Humans who enslaved other humans. Empires that crushed anyone who opposed them. And we learned slowly and painfully that freedom isn't given freely. It's taken. It's earned with blood and sacrifice. She gestured to the humans standing behind her. Every person in this room knows stories from our history. Stories of people who fought impossible battles because surrender meant losing everything that made life worth living. We know about the slaves who rebelled even though they knew they would die. We know about the soldiers who held impossible positions because retreat meant their families would suffer. We know about ordinary people who became heroes because they refused to accept tyranny. Her voice grew stronger. You asked why we fight so hard? Because we know the alternative. We know what it means to live under the boot of conquerors. We've done it to each other for thousands of years. And we learned that some things are worse than death. Slavery is worse. Oppression is worse. Living on your knees while someone else decides if you deserve to exist is worse. The chamber was completely silent. So when you came to us with your ultimatum, War Marshal, you weren't just threatening to destroy our colonies or even our planet. You were threatening to take our freedom. And humans have decided again and again throughout our history that freedom is worth dying for. Korex closed his eyes. I understand now. Too late, but I understand. He opened them again. We accept your terms. The Krathon delegation signed the documents. The war was over. As the various species filed out of the chamber, many approached Sarah. Some congratulated her. Some seemed angry that humans had disrupted the galactic order. But most seemed thoughtful, as if reconsidering long-held beliefs about strength and weakness. The ancient mediator approached Sarah as she prepared to leave. Ambassador Chen, the Galactic Council has made a decision. We are updating our records about humanity. What kind of update? We are classifying your species as a persistence predator. Extreme caution is advised when dealing with humans. We are recommending that all species approach humanity with respect and good faith negotiation. We never wanted to be feared, Sarah said quietly. We just wanted to be left alone. Then you should have been weaker, the mediator replied, not unkindly. Strength brings respect. Sometimes it brings fear. You cannot control how others perceive you, only how you act. 3 months later, Korex found himself in an unexpected position. The Krathon government, facing economic collapse and social unrest, had appointed him as an ambassador. His first assignment was to speak at the Galactic Council about the war with humanity. He stood before the assembled species and told them everything. About the ambushes and the traps. About soldiers who chose to die rather than surrender information. About the human insurgent who could have killed him but chose mercy instead. About the terrible cost of underestimating an enemy. I was there when this war began, Korex said. I heard Ambassador Chen refuse our ultimatum. I thought she was foolish. I thought humanity would break. He paused. I was wrong. Humans don't break. They bend under pressure, yes. They suffer terrible losses. But they don't break. And when they've bent as far as they can, they push back with everything they have. He looked directly at the species that had aggressive tendencies. The ones who might consider expansion through conquest. Learn from my mistake. Learn from the Dominion's mistake. Humanity calls their species name something that should have warned us. They call themselves humanity, but it should be called unbreakable will. Never make the mistake of going to war with humans unless you're prepared to fight forever, because that's exactly what they'll do. A representative from a militaristic species stood up. Are you saying they're unbeatable? No, Korex replied. I'm saying that beating them costs more than you can afford to pay. Even if you win every battle, even if you destroy their worlds, the survivors will keep fighting, and they'll teach their children to keep fighting. And those children will teach their children. Humans have been fighting each other for 5,000 years. They know how to hold grudges. They know how to wait for revenge. They know how to suffer and keep going. He sat down slowly. The Krathon Dominion thought we were strong. We had conquered 47 star systems. We had never lost a war. But we learned that there are different kinds of strength. We had strength in numbers and technology. Humans have strength in spirit and determination. In the end, their strength proved more valuable than ours. Back on Earth, Sarah Chen stood in a memorial park that had been built to honor those who died in the war. Thousands of names were carved into black stone. Soldiers, civilians, people from every human colony. A young girl approached her, maybe 8 years old, holding her mother's hand. "Are you Ambassador Chen?" the girl asked. "I am. My dad died in the war. On New Terra. He was a Marine." Sarah knelt down to the girl's level. "I'm sorry. He was very brave." The girl nodded seriously. "Mom says he died so I could be free." "Is that true?" Sarah looked at the child's innocent face and felt the weight of everything they had fought for. "Yes. He fought so you could grow up in a world where no one could force you to be something you're not, where you could make your own choices, where you could be free." "Then it was worth it," the girl said simply. "Mom says freedom is always worth fighting for." Sarah watched the girl walk away with her mother and felt tears in her eyes. The war had cost them so much, but they had survived. They had won, and they had taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo for generations. Some species bend, some species break. Humans do neither. They endure. They adapt. They fight. And they never ever forget why they're fighting. Above the park, human ships patrolled the sky. On distant colonies, people rebuilt what had been destroyed. In diplomatic chambers across the galaxy, ambassadors spoke with new respect when they addressed humanity. The Krathon had chosen war. They thought they were fighting children with primitive weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting a species that had been preparing for this moment since the first human picked up a rock and refused to surrender. The regret came fast. The lessons learned would last forever, and humanity, the youngest spacefaring species in the galaxy, took its place among the stars not as conquerors or victims, but as equals who had earned their freedom through blood, sacrifice, and an unbreakable refusal to quit. The war was over. The legend was just beginning.